St. John a real paradise. So nice, so nice. The Virgin Islands nice. So nice,
so very simply put, the vast majority of St. Johnians and for some years have been anticipating the development of a new school, whether it be pre-K through 12, the redevelopment of Guy Benjamin or Julius Sproul, or a new school altogether. We've anticipated new educational facilities for a long time, and so at the very crux of it, everyone wants to see a school built, a state-of-the-art school built. The issue that we're facing right now, and the debate that we're having, is that the way in which the current administration is pursuing building the new school is not something that a lot of people are in alignment with. And when I say that, I'm referencing the swapping of lands between the Department of Interior and the National Park Service and the territorial government of the tract in Katwinburg and the Whistling Key parcel.
So what is the argument? Why are you not in favor of it?
Most people are unfamiliar with a lot of the struggles that people on St. John have faced, especially with the National Park Service and the Department of Interior, and the heavy-handedness of the federal government. And so a lot of times our arguments against the park and the Department of Interior, they might seem to be naggy to people off of St. John who haven't had to fight the National Park Service back for lands that we know we own, who haven't been maced in the beach or on your own property by park rangers who are unfamiliar with who you are and your context in this space, having to pay to make a living throughout the park, or to go to Trunk Bay Beach as native and ancestral Virgin Islanders. The reality that we face living on island day to day and dealing with the National Park Service occupying 75% of this space is one that warrants the rest of the Virgin Islands to pay attention, especially when we respond to these kinds of situations with this level of energy.
So tell me about you. Introduce yourself, who you are, your background, where you're from, educational background, your positions.
That's a loaded question. My name is Gregory Marsh Jr. I'm a deeply rooted ancestral native of St. John, with roots tracing back, pre-Danish colonial roots tracing back to the East End in the 1600s. I'm an architect, professional architect and woodworker, actually the only licensed architect on St. John from St. John. I'm the vice president and co-founder of St. John Co., the St. John Heritage Collective, which is essentially a land rights nonprofit that seeks to preserve the identity, history, and culture of the people of St. John. I'm also the territorial chairman of the Virgin Islands Historic Preservation Commission. I sit on the CZM district committee for St. John, and I serve on a few other nonprofit boards here and there. I'm a father to an amazingly beautiful young man. His name is Akeju Siasi, community activist, culture bearer, etc., etc.
How did you become active in issues of concern, specifically for those here in St. John? What led you to become active and, vocal?
Well, I grew up around very active people. Many folks would know some relatives of mine: Malik Siku, Wilma Marsh Monsanto, Larry Sewer. I grew up around a lot of high energy persons with lots of care and passion about the island of St. John and the Virgin Islands on a whole. And so a lot of my life has been seeing these people moving and engaging our communities and our families, politics and things like that. And so I've always had sort of a sense of community engagement. And that passion sort of just grew over the years. I went to undergrad in the Obama years, and so I was able to participate in a lot of the progressive movements that were happening on the mainland. And I got very sort of enthralled with the idea of public engagement on a much more substantial level. And so when I returned home after my master's, sort of hit the ground running, participated in a few political campaigns here, worked for the current administration after I taught for a few years at Julius Sprouse School before going into the private sector. And I just continue to want to be instrumental in encouraging change here. Good, progressive, authentic and genuine change in the Virgin Islands.
So tell us, let's listen up. What makes St. John so special? What makes St. John nice, beautiful? What makes this place a love city, in your word?
People ignore it a lot, but what really makes St. John special is her people. We face a reality where, because of the tourism product that we promote right now, people fall in love with St. John as a physical space. They love the unspoiled natural green beauty, the white sandy beaches, but really St. John wouldn't be St. John without her people and the legacy of her people. I mean, St. John is the birthplace of freedom in the Western Hemisphere. The first successful revolution of an enslaved people recorded in history, Western Hemisphere history, took place in Coral Bay at Fortsburg in 1733. And we bear the legacy of that activity, that interaction, that encouraged, the fire burn and emancipation, that spurred there was a revolution in Martinique the following year of the French slaves that encouraged, the Haitian Revolution, and which became the first republic. So we have deeply rooted, rich history as a people. And that manifests in a lot of different ways in how we deal with each other, how we deal with our friends and families and neighbors from the rest of the Caribbean, because I do believe in a pan-Caribbean people. But her people make her special. And too often our visitors and even our neighbors look at that through a guise that this place is her people. And so the current Lieutenant Governor Roach made the statement himself in an inaugural speech a few years ago, saying, you could only test a loving, caring people for so long before the loving, tender kindness runs out, and that loving, caring people respond. And the displacement that St. Johnians are facing at the local level and at the federal level is at some point will warrant a change in temperament. And I think a lot of people already recognize that if you come to the space and you love the space and you ignore the people, all the dynamics don't come together in a very good, cohesive, balanced way. And so there becomes opportunity for rifts and tension, and we're starting to see a lot of that now. There's a lot of divide amongst St. Johnian, ancestral St. Johnians, other Caribbean migrants, expats from the US mainland and other places. The community isn't as loving as it was before. When my dear cousin Victor Sewer coined the term Love City, it was a very different St. John when he made that declaration.
All right, good very. So, if not this opportunity, not this land, what is the option? What are you all presenting? I have told the administration, or what have you all said is the next best option?
So we have presented, and by we I mean people on St. John who have been organizing around this school and land swap conversation, at least for the past 6 months, some of us for years, as much as 30-40 years, but especially in the past 6 months. The options we've presented are a few. First off, there was a resolution when the ex-delegate Donna Christensen was in the Congress to lease the same parcel of land for the construction of a new school. Residents in the area, Katzenberg at the time, were opposed to a public school being developed in their neighborhood, and so since that lease had to go through Congress, it passed the House and failed in the Senate. But we made the recommendation that they revisit that lease option as we're talking now again about the development of a new school. We've asked them to pursue the option of just a gift of land. Very recently there was a precedent set. Angus King, a senator from Maine, and you could find the details online, but he was able to have a parcel of land, a large parcel of land, gifted to the people of Maine for the developmental needs of their community. We've presented that the government of the Virgin Islands put out an RFP or RFQ to the people of St. John so that land-owning families can make decisions or negotiations around the possibility of selling parcels of land for the development of a new school, which might mean that we might have to develop more than one campus, as we've had in the past, as opposed to one larger campus. But we won't know the context of that until that option is pursued. We've also talked about, instead of swapping Whistling Key, there are submerged lands attached to parcels of land that have been donated to the National Park Service over the past few years, that still can be brought into the National Coral Reef Monument. And so doing an assessment of those submerged lands and bringing those into the monument as the swap instead is an option we presented. We've also talked about the possibility of the Friends of the National Park gifting 4 acres of land in L'Esperance for the swap as well, and they've written a letter declaring that this option is still available on the table. If the governor and the administration requests it, they're more than willing to gift the 4 acres to the government in lieu of swapping Whistling Key. And so we have those, and some persons have talked about some other things here and there, but those are the main options that we've presented as alternatives to Whistling Key. And really talking about the Whistling Key, just looking at numbers, the Whistling Key swap is really frustrating to a lot of people, because at any way you look at it, there's a loss. The parcel in Catherineburg is 11 acres, but 3 of those 11 acres you can't develop because of cultural resources. And so it's really 8 acres that we're getting for the Catherineburg parcel, whereas the Whistling Key Island is 18 acres approximately. And so we're really losing when we look at that proposition. We're getting 8 for 18. And so even if the conversation was we're swapping 18 for 18, they would gloss over with St. Jonians very differently than it is now. But at the very, very, very front end, you see a loss. And so it's hard to have a conversation where you justify that being a valid pursuit to people who, like I said earlier on, have had to fight the park for land back. We've fought the park over the years to claim space that we know is ours. Unfortunately, it's a lot of on the Marsh side, at least, we've had documentation from the 1800s, because the first estate we purchased was in 1835 or so. We have old Danish documents that show what our ownership looks like and surveys, and so we've been able to get land back from the park because we've been able to show our proof. But there are some families who haven't had the luxury of maintaining paper trails and things like that, and we're literally fighting the park to reclaim space that we know is ours, by record and by our lived experience. And so it's unfair to ask a people who've had to suffer in those kinds of ways and for generations to give more to an entity that takes, to an entity that's extractive.
And the whole place nice, so nice, so nice. Sweet, sweet St. Thomas nice, so nice, so nice. St. Cry full of pure vibes, so nice,